The lights were hot. August 18th, 2026. South Carolina. Greta Van Susteren stood at the edge of the stage, cards in hand, and looked at the woman in the center chair. Interim Senator Darline Graham. She'd been in the seat for 5 weeks, but this was her first real test, a debate, live, with a full 6-year term on the line. Greta didn't soften it. Senator, are Taiwan and the South China Sea national security issues for the United States? A beat. 2 beats. Darline shifted in her chair. Then she leaned into the mic. I'm just going to be honest here. I'm not that informed on national security, but I do support the military. The audience made a sound. Not a gasp, a groan. The kind of sound a room makes when someone says the quiet part out loud. She tried to recover. I'm not a polished politician up here. That was worse. Because the job she was asking for isn't a customer service desk. It's a vote on whether Taiwan burns. It's a vote on carrier groups and war powers, and the exact questions she just admitted she can't answer. So here's the question hanging over that stage. How does someone who isn't informed on national security end up in one of the most powerful seats on earth? The answer starts with a name. Lindsey Graham, the most famous hawk in the Senate, her brother. He held that seat for over 2 decades, built a career on being the loudest voice for intervention, for Taiwan, for the South China Sea. When he died, the seat didn't go to a policy expert, it went to his sister. And the person who put her there, the most powerful man in American politics. Let's dig into it. Lindsey Graham dropped dead on July 2nd, 2026. Aortic dissection, age 70. The man who spent 2 decades treating war like a dinner reservation was gone before the ambulance reached the hospital. South Carolina's senior senator, the loudest hawk in the chamber, the guy who once suggested Taiwan buy 50,000 Stinger missiles like he was ordering appetizers for the table. Gone. And then came the phone call. Governor Henry McMaster had a vacancy to fill. Under state law, the governor appoints a replacement to serve out the term. McMaster could have picked anyone. A state legislator, a former congressman, a wealthy donor. The field of loyal Republican soldiers in South Carolina is not exactly thin. He picked Darline Graham Nordone, Lindsey's sister. That's the whole resume. Darline Graham Nordone had never held elected office, never ran a campaign, never chaired a state party committee. Her political credential was a last name and a blood relation to a dead man. And she was sworn in on July 14th, 2026, becoming South Carolina's first woman in the United States Senate. Here's the part that should make you pause. McMaster didn't make this call alone. The White House was involved. President Trump personally recommended Darline for the seat. Not quietly. Not through back channels. A direct, explicit endorsement that the governor was happy to relay to reporters. Why would Trump do that? Think about what Trump values. Loyalty. Fighters. People who owe him. South Carolina is packed with Trump loyalists who would crawl over broken glass for the appointment. Ralph Norman, the congressman from the 5th District, had been waiting for this seat for years. He's been a Trump ally since 2016. He was the obvious pick. Trump passed on him. For a woman with no political history, no donor network, no voting record to defend or attack. And then Darline did something even stranger. She announced she's running for the full term, not just finishing her brother's term. She wants the seat permanently. The runoff is August 25th against Ralph Norman. The man Trump snubbed is now her opponent. The conservative blog, The Last Refuge, which has spent years defending Trump against every accusation imaginable, wrote something it almost never writes. A direct quote, "We in SC don't want a Nepo senator." That's the base talking. The people who wave Trump flags at rallies. The people who think the deep state stole 2020. They're looking at Darline Graham Nordone and seeing exactly what she is. A placeholder with a familiar name. So the question isn't whether Darline is qualified. She isn't. The question is what Trump sees in her that the rest of us don't. A woman with no record can't be blackmailed with a record. A woman who owes everything to one phone call doesn't negotiate. She obeys. That's the kind of senator a second-term president wants. 13.7 million. That's how many TikTok posts have tagged politicians as Nepo babies in the last 2 years alone. The algorithm feeds on it. The comment sections rage about it. And yet, look at who keeps winning. The New York Times ran a headline back in 2014 that should have ended the conversation forever. Americans like members of prominent political families more than they're willing to admit. Not tolerate. Not accept. Like. The polling was brutal. Voters said they hated dynasties, then pulled the lever for the same three surnames generation after generation. Bush, Clinton, Bush, Clinton. 28 years of the White House rotating between two families. That's not a pattern. That's a lease agreement. And in 2016, we almost got the logical endpoint. Jeb Bush versus Hillary Clinton? Literal dynasty versus dynasty final. The country looked at that matchup and collectively flinched, but here's the part nobody mentions. Both of them got there because millions of Americans donated, volunteered, and voted in the primary. The flinch came late. The support came first. Historian Rick Perlstein put it in one sentence to Vox: American politics is simply dynastic. Not was, is, present tense. He said that like a man describing gravity. But the dynasty story has a quieter wing, and it's the one that matters for what's coming. For nearly a century, when a senator died in office, governors followed an unwritten rule: appoint the widow, finish the term, keep the seat warm. Nearly 4 dozen women entered the Senate this way over the last 100 years. Margaret Chase Smith, Maureen Neuberger, Jean Carnahan, names that show up in civics textbooks as pioneers, but the door they walked through wasn't built for them. It was built for the dead man's name. The House's own history office describes the design in language so clinical it's almost poetic. These appointees were meant to serve only briefly and provide a seamless transition. Seamless. Transition, not inheritance, not leadership, just a bridge between two men. So here's the question that should be keeping you up. If the widow's seat was always meant to be temporary, a placeholder with a pulse, then what happens when one of them refuses to leave? What's actually different about Darline Graham? Darline's Senate website lists her top priority as protecting South Carolina's way of life. Her second priority is standing with President Trump. Her third priority is a form where you can request a flag flown over the Capitol. The site does not list her qualifications. There is a reason for that. She is the first person in American history appointed to the Senate to replace a sibling. Wikipedia confirms it. Not a widow, not a son waiting his turn. A sister. And not just any sister. The one who, when asked about national security on live television, said, "I'm not that informed on national security." The one who, in the same debate, got her own state's population wrong. South Carolina has about 5.3 million people. Darline said 6 million. Then she smiled and said, "I'm not a polished politician up here." That was the strategy. Wrap the gaps in sincerity. Make unpreparedness sound like authenticity. And it worked. On August 11, she led Norman by 8 points in the primary. Both advanced to the August 25 runoff, not a landslide, a stumble across the line. But here's the part nobody mentions. The widows at least understood the deal. They honored the dead. A quiet, dignified transition. Everyone in the room knew what was happening, and everyone pretended it was fine. Darline doesn't even pretend. She's not changing the rules, she's exposing them. Pew Research ran the numbers in August 2026. Since 1990, appointed senators who ran to keep the seat, 62% lost, 38% won. That's not a coin flip, that's a pattern. And after the debate, even pro-Trump pundits started using the phrase death spiral. Not tough race, not uphill battle. Death spiral. But can stop isn't will stop. She might lose in November, she might win. Either way, the institution doesn't change. The seat was filled. The vote was cast. The law was made, and nobody needed an election to do it. Which brings us to the question, if a seat can be inherited, someone who was never elected sitting in an elected seat, then what about the vote itself? Can a vote be inherited? Brad Parscale saw it before most people did. September 2019, California Republican Convention. Trump's 2020 campaign manager stood in front of the room and said it out loud. The Trumps will be a dynasty that lasts for decades. Not a prediction. A blueprint. Trump put it even plainer. "I'm building my own dynasty. One tweet at a time, brick by brick." Look, most politicians say that kind of thing and it's just noise. But Trump meant it literally, and the bricks aren't tweets. They're people. Specific people placed in specific seats. First tool, the endorsement. This primary cycle alone, his record is 67 wins, 6 losses. That's 91.8%. If Trump endorses you, you're probably going to Congress. He doesn't just predict winners, he manufactures them. A man who can put you into office is a man you call before you make a decision. Second tool, the recommendation. Governors listen when he calls. Darline is the proof. He didn't appoint her himself. He didn't have to. One word to the right person, and a seat opens up. That's the quiet power. The one that doesn't show up on ballots. But here's the part nobody mentions. The third tool is the family placements, and this is where it gets strange. Kimberly Guilfoyle was engaged to Donald Trump Jr. from 2021 to 2024. Never married. Yet in 2025 she became U.S. ambassador to Greece. Not because she was a diplomat. Because she wore the ring for a while. That's the entry fee. Jared Kushner ran Middle East policy in the first term. No experience, no election. Just a son-in-law with a desk in the West Wing. Ivanka sat as a senior White House advisor. Same building, same access, same last name. Nomination plus appointment plus exposure. 3 powers in one family. And here's the thing about Darline. Trump doesn't care about her as a person. He cares about the surname and the script. She's a character in a story he's been writing since 2015. The right surname in the right seat at the right time. So what does this machine actually build? Look, the face says it all. A little girl in a padded white coat, standing next to her father on an observation deck, watching a Hwasong 17 climb into a gray November sky. State cameras made sure you saw her. Not her face exactly, but her presence, the framing. The pause before the launch, as if waiting for her to be ready. That was 2022. Kim Joo-a was maybe 10. No election. No debate. No opponent. Just appearances. A missile test here. A military parade there. A visit to the Kim Il-sung Mausoleum in 2023. Standing beside her parents, bowing at exactly the right angle. Every frame engineered. Every public moment a silent announcement. And the title changed. Not suddenly. Slowly. State media first called her the beloved child. Then, sometime later, the respected child. One word, that was the coronation. In a system with no ballots. Vocabulary is the ballot box. South Korean intelligence noticed. They publicly assessed her as the likely heir. Not because she gave a speech. Not because she won anything. Because she kept appearing in the right places, at the right times, wearing the right coat. But here's the thing nobody says out loud. America doesn't have an heir title. There's no respected child in the Constitution. No mausoleum photo op with a dead founder. No missile test where the cameras linger on the next generation. Yet the toolbox is the same. Media exposure, controlled appearances, family loyalty as a political brand. Party endorsement as a rubber stamp. The ingredients are identical. One system calls it grooming. The other calls it a campaign. The recipe is just prettier. The missile test becomes a rally. The mausoleum becomes a convention floor. The state cameras become friendly networks. The respected child becomes a prime-time speaking slot. So what's the real difference between the two systems? Is it the mechanism? One uses a ballot. The other uses a bow. Or is one just honest about what it's doing? In Pyongyang, the succession question was never really a question. When the third generation took over, the army didn't get a ballot. They got a parade. Tanks, missiles, goose-stepping battalions. The message was simple. This family rules because it commands the guns. Legitimacy flows from the barrel of a howitzer, not from the consent of the governed. There's no voting booth in North Korea that matters. There's a firing squad for anyone who suggests there should be. But here's the part nobody mentions. America built the exact opposite machine, and it runs on something far more fragile than artillery. It runs on your quiet little nod. Not a gun. Not a tank. A vote. That's the entire foundation. The dynasty doesn't need the army to hold power. It needs you to show up, fill in a circle, and go home feeling like you participated. The moment you stop doing that, the whole thing collapses under its own weight. So the system has to keep you believing the choice is real, even when the menu is fixed. Look at how China handles the same problem. Everyone calls it an opaque system. And sure, The cadre selection process puts loyalty before competence every single time. But at least it happens behind closed doors. There are procedures, reviews, announcements. The machinery is hidden. You don't see the knives changing hands. You just wake up one morning and there's a new face on the front page, and everyone pretends it was always going to be him. America this week did it in broad daylight. They appointed the sister. They endorsed her. They put her on a debate stage and let the whole country watch her flop. Live, on camera. No smoke-filled room, no party congress, no backroom deal. A primary. An actual primary with actual voters, and those voters still picked her. That's the twist nobody wants to sit with. North Korea hides the succession because it can't survive scrutiny. America broadcasts the succession because it doesn't have to survive scrutiny. It just has to survive your participation. The performance is the point. The camera rolling is the legitimacy. You watched the flop. You saw the endorsement. You knew the fix was in, and the primary still delivered the expected result. Not despite the transparency, because of it. So think about what's really being passed down here. Not just a seat, not just a name. A claim on your consent, wrapped in a ballot instead of a birth certificate. Because if it can, then the difference between the Hermit Kingdom and the Shining City isn't a difference of kind. It's a difference of lighting. The answer is no. Legally, a vote cannot be inherited. One person, one vote, non-transferable. It says so in every civics textbook, every election law, every speech about the sacred franchise. You cannot will your ballot to your son. You cannot gift it to your daughter on her 18th birthday. The state does not recognize voting as property. But here's the thing nobody wants to say out loud. In practice, it is being inherited. Just not through a will. Through a machine with 3 moving parts. Nomination, appointment, exposure. When a family controls who gets endorsed, who gets recommended, who gets seen, the vote stops being a choice. It becomes a formality. You are not voting for a person. You are voting for a surname. The ballot paper has a name on it, but the name is just a logo. Think about how it works in practice. When the surname is famous, nobody asks what the candidate believes. Nobody asks what they've done. The surname does the talking. In a primary, the family name is a shortcut. Donors line up, endorsements follow. Media coverage follows the endorsements. The vote's nominal owner is still you. Its actual owner is becoming the family. Now here's the darkest layer. If votes can be inherited, what is an election? It stops being a tool of democracy. It becomes a tool for beautifying hereditary rule. The family controls who gets nominated, who gets appointed, who gets seen. The election becomes a walkthrough for the anointed surname, full ceremony, sacred rituals, predetermined outcome. You stand in line. You take the ballot. You fill in the circle. But the circle was already filled in before you got there. You are not choosing, you are confirming. Think about North Korea's parades. The tanks roll, the missiles roll, the people wave flags. But the parades are not for the people. They are gold plating for Kim Joo-ae. The heir stands on the balcony. The crowd cheers. The cameras capture it. The whole thing is a ritual of inevitability. The outcome was decided years ago. The parade just makes it look like a choice. America's primaries are not entirely for the voters either. They are a walkthrough for the anointed surname. The donors line up first. The endorsements follow. The media coverage follows the endorsements. By the time the actual voting happens, the field has been cleared. The alternatives have been starved of oxygen. The race is a procession. The ballot becomes the ticket to a coronation. Here's the part that should keep you up at night. The election becomes the dynasty's wedding. The bride and groom are already. The guests arrive. The music plays. The vows are read. Everyone goes home and says, "What a beautiful ceremony." But nobody got to vote on the marriage. The marriage was arranged long before the invitations went out. The ceremony just makes it look like love. So can a vote be inherited? Legally, no. In practice, yes. The only question left is whether you are the voter. August 18. South Carolina. The woman at the microphone still hasn't gotten her answer. She said she wasn't that. Informed on national security, and the room laughed, and then the room moved on. But the question she actually asked never left the stage. Look at the 2 names on that ballot. One of them built a machine that needs an army to survive. The other built a machine that needs only one thing from you. North Korea's Dynasty needs an army. America's Dynasty just needs your vote. That's the part nobody mentions. Kim's family spent 70 years preparing for a war they'll never fight. The other families spent 70 years preparing for an election they already believe they've won. One stockpiles missiles, the other stockpiles surnames. So can a vote be inherited? Legally, no. But when one surname can inherit nomination, appointment, and exposure at the same time, the vote in your hand stops being a choice. It becomes a confirmation. You're not electing a person anymore. You're ratifying a name. The runoff is August 25. 10 days, a family name on one side, a question mark on the other. And somewhere in South Carolina, a woman who admitted she didn't know enough is still waiting for someone to tell her why she should. I'm just a cat. I never had a vote, and I'm pretty sure nobody ever counted my whiskers for a quorum. But I've watched humans treat their ballots like treasure, then spend them like lottery tickets they've already decided to lose. The question was never whether a vote can be passed down. The question is whether you'll still use yours like it's yours. See you in the next one.